Welcome to this special Bradley Prizes edition of Conceived in Liberty, a Bradley Speaker Series. I'm Rick Graber, president of the Bradley Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us today. Our guest today is the Honorable Betsy DeVos. Betsy, of course, is best known for her 4 years as serving as the 11th United States Secretary of Education, but she spent nearly 40 years advocating on behalf of education freedom for kids and their families. Betsy is also a 2023 Bradley Prize winner. Betsy, congratulations and welcome.
Thanks so much, Rick. I'm really honored to be with you.
Thanks so much for being here. Betsy, let's jump right in. You first got involved in education through your charitable work, but a lot has happened since then. Talk to us a little bit about your journey from philanthropist to outspoken advocate for education freedom to cabinet secretary, and now maybe back to philanthropist and advocate. Talk about that journey. It's fascinating.
Sure. Well, it really began when Dixon, my oldest son, was going to start kindergarten. And we knew that we were going to be able to send him and subsequent children wherever we thought was best for them. So I looked around West Michigan where we live. And in that process, I discovered a wonderful little Christian school in the heart of the city that was serving children from the neighborhood, mostly from low-income families. And although Rick did not go there, I started volunteering there. The more I got involved, the more quickly I realized just how unjust the policies were surrounding how kids are funded with their education, or how education is funded. Because frankly, kids haven't been funded. It's been the system that's been funded. And so for every family that was at this little school, there were probably 10 or 20 other families that would have loved to have their children in a school like that one, but couldn't afford it. Those families there couldn't afford it. The operating funds have to be raised from benefactors in the community, almost 90% of them. So that led me into a long process around Dick and I worked together to supply scholarships to more families to be able to make those choices. And then we started working on helping to get charter schools in Michigan, and our advocacy grew. And over time, it was very evident that we had to add a political component to that advocacy. In other words, we had to get involved in the winning or in the electing or defeating of individuals who would or would not support policies that would support education freedom. So it was it's been a very long process, but where the progress has been made is where the advocacy has been combined with the political muscle to actually support those who support education freedom.
I mean, as you point out, the hurdles have been difficult, and I'm sure there have been good days and bad days along the way in this process. I mean, there's been a lot of legislative hurdles, legal hurdles, regulatory challenges, but today we've got 21 states that have some form of education freedom. Did you ever think we'd get to this point?
Well, yes, I've long been very optimistic around both the logic of the argument for education freedom, as well as the emotional appeal. All you have to do is talk to one or two kids who've had the opportunity to make those choices, whose families have had that opportunity, and you realize what a life changer this can be for those kids. And so I knew that we were going to get here at one point, but we still have a long ways to go. We got here because there have been many trailblazers, that I've had the privilege to work with over the decades, who have been consistently working to make the case, to elect the individuals, to make the arguments, to advocate. And then I think, frankly, COVID was the sort of linchpin, the key to unleashing the kind of momentum behind really bold and widespread policy that the policies are now going to make just a tremendous difference for the kids in the states that are passing these.
Certainly Arkansas, Iowa. I mean, the list of states just goes on, and it's wonderful.
Yep.
But in some ways, passing the laws is the easy part. I mean, we've experienced that here in Wisconsin and in Milwaukee, where we're almost 40 years into this experiment. There's a long road ahead, even after the laws are passed. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And in the case of Wisconsin, the program, as you well know, from the start was more limited. And so it's harder to get the numbers and the momentum behind the kind of full-scale change that you can see ultimately with a statewide universal program, which of course is still in its infancy in West Virginia and Arkansas, and then all of the other states that are passing them now. But the key is going to be to really help families find the alternatives or create the alternatives, frankly. And, the next few years are going to really reveal the tremendous creativity and innovative entrepreneurial nature of, folks across this country, because how kids experience their K-12 years can begin to look so much different than what they have known for what we've all known for 175 years. But it will be a very transitional period, but it's undeniable that the momentum behind funding students instead of buildings and systems is a real fundamental shift that's going to change so many things down the road.
Exciting.
It is.
Just exciting, and I couldn't agree more. Let's talk a little bit about your time as secretary. I think it's an understatement to say that you had your fair share of challenges with teachers' unions, and you highlighted that in your book, Hostages No More. Considering the truly awful proficiency levels of students in urban public schools, again, we see that here in Milwaukee, as well as the infiltration of curricula that parents are just not comfortable with. It seems like we're at a point that many families, at least, are just tired or fed up with these teachers' unions. But they have a stranglehold. Well, I mean, what's it going to take to loosen that stranglehold?
Well, the teachers' unions and then all of their allied organizations certainly have had the power and the control. We've seen it consolidated at the federal level. I experienced it on a daily basis. But the reality is that parents have awakened, and parents who never before thought there was a problem in their children's school have now been awakened to the fact that maybe their children's curriculum is not very robust or doesn't have high expectations at all, or because they had a front row seat to that when they were distance learning during COVID. Or perhaps they've been awakened to the fact that their children are being taught things that are absolutely contrary to their own family's values, whether it's the critical race theories, whether it's the early, young child hypersexualization, whatever the issues are, there are many of them. And so families have awakened to this and have really concluded that what the way forward is when they are able to make those choices and decisions. And so the political piece around this, the calculation and the dynamic around it has totally changed in the last couple of years, because I think the unions overreached at every step of the way, keeping schools locked down, shut down, and then trying to blame everyone else. And the devastation that it has wreaked on millions and millions of kids, we're not going to even know the full extent of that for a number of years yet. The only way to overcome that is really to give freedom to families and to kids to find the way that they are going to learn and that they are going to make progress. Because you're absolutely right. The outcomes, the results, the achievement levels are simply, they are indefensible. And they have been. They were indefensible for years before COVID, but they've been revealed in their full form since the COVID months.
There's a lot of power out there in the parents. We just have to unleash it. And many organizations, and you and others are doing your best to do just that. And it's great stuff. Let's talk a little bit about another issue that you've been outspoken about, and that's Title IX. You've said that we just have to stop the Biden administration from rewriting Title IX and erasing 50 years of progress for women. Tell us a little bit more about how a rewrite would impact young girls and women and the message it sends to them.
Well, sure. So Title IX and the regulation and rules surrounding the implementation of and the enforcing of Title IX, the notion that everyone should have equal access to education, and that was then expanded more. And the intention 50 years ago was to ensure that young women had an equal opportunity to participate in sports. Well, that is at grave threat of being totally, essentially obliterated by the proposed rule that the Biden administration has undertaken. They are in the process of rewriting the definition of biological sex, what we've all known to be male and female, and extending it to gender identity and anything, basically anything you choose to be at any given time. And so what has meant and what many young women are contending with today is being on teams and having to compete against biological males who have decided that they are now female. And it is not fair for women. It really will totally eviscerate women's sports. And I don't think, I mean, this will have to be fought in the courts, obviously. But the proposed rule takes it that far, and then on the side of experience on campus and the issues of sexual misconduct, it totally does away with due process protections. So there are threats interwoven in this entire proposed rule, and we're going to have to fight for young women, fight for students in general. To ensure that the original intent around Title IX is ultimately respected and protected.
Yes. Speaking of the courts, the Supreme Court will soon decide whether the Biden administration's decision to cancel student loan debt is constitutional. Now, some on the left have argued that, well, during the pandemic, small businesses got a break. Shouldn't we do the same thing with students? And you've made the case that there's some faulty logic there. Expand on that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, students have not had to pay on their student loans since the first day, or basically the first day of the pandemic, and they have not accrued interest. So they've been held harmless. And to say that somehow equates to small business loans, no, businesses had to shut their doors and they actually lost customers. They lost opportunity to have, income business during that period of time. Students haven't lost anything. In fact, they've been protected for this almost 3 years. And we know that many of them, well over half of them, say we don't even need to be considered, or we shouldn't be considered for cancellation. It is a ridiculous comparison. And furthermore, we have pushed off the resumption of paying on student loans far longer than anyone argued was necessary. And so this notion that President Biden can, by the stroke of a pen, cancel billions and billions of dollars, by most accounts, nearly $500 billion in student loan debt, is way outside the bounds of the executive. And I believe the court is going to find for that position. And, just considering the impact and the implications just sort of canceling this would have on the rest of Americans, 2 out of 3 who never attended college, and not to mention all of the other students who have faithfully paid over the years on their student loans and paid them off. This was nothing but a political ploy to win votes in the last election. And it was, attempted to be wrapped in a policy that was very appealing to young people, but it has no constitutional grounding. Congress has the power of the purse, not the president.
I mean, it does send the wrong message, doesn't it? I mean, you grew up in Michigan in a family that worked hard. Your dad had invented the light mirror on visors and cars, and I think you helped assemble those on the line during the third shift.
Yes.
Um, Tell us about how that experience influenced you, and how do we instill a greater dignity of work in young people today? It's so important.
Well, with regard to the student loan issue, I mean, it does send absolutely the wrong message
Yes,
to
it
say
does.
we could just wipe away and cancel a whole bunch of student debt. It doesn't solve any problem. We know that the cost of higher education has continued to escalate way beyond the rate of inflation. So let's get at that and let's peel that back and understand why. Let's also look at how we hold institutions more accountable for what they have to offer. Instead of, the arms race with climbing walls and lazy rivers and, dozens of DEI staff, let's look at what the value of a higher education is. But importantly, let's also reinforce the importance and value of work, that the dignity that it brings to an individual. I mean, I do think back to my days on the third shift on the core line at the plant at my dad's factory. It was a very, very good experience for me. First of all, it was hard work. It was not glamorous work by any means. I chose the third shift, so that was my choosing. But it really did reinforce for me that we all have a role to play. We all can contribute in some way to those around us. And learning how to work hard, learning how to be reliable, showing up on time, doing what you've committed to do. Those are valuable lessons that all young people have to learn. And absent that, there's a hole in them. I mean, they're missing so much if they do not know and understand the value and dignity of work.
Last question, Betsy. You've been a fellow warrior with the Bradley Foundation for a long time on this fight for education freedom. Tell us what it means to you to win a Bradley Prize.
Well, I am so honored to have even been considered and then named for a Bradley Prize this year. I think so highly of the work that the Bradley Foundation has done over the years, the impact that the foundation, you and so many others have had on the lives of individuals, most of whom will never know or have a personal introduction to. But it really is an honor, and I look at it as just representing the dozens of others with whom I've had the privilege of working so long and hard to advance education freedom. And our work is not done, but I am grateful to the Bradley Foundation for this opportunity to talk further about the importance of this work and to take an accolade on behalf of so many others that I have stood shoulder to shoulder with.
We look forward to the celebration. It's going to be a wonderful evening for sure. Betsy DeVos, thanks so much for your time today, and thanks for all of the great work that you've done on behalf of education freedom in this country. Few, if anyone in this country, has done more than you have to promote this very, very important cause. And to all of you, thanks as always for joining us on this episode of Conceived in Liberty.